Hey, nerds, and welcome back in. We are here for an interview with one of our sponsors for this. A very generous sponsor, by the way, folks. Um, we hit our first goal, so we gave away a PDF of Inevitable. But if we hit 500, we're going to do our first physical book giveaway, which is Valor Best in Class, the starter adventure. We will talk more about that if you want to find out about that. But hi, I am Sophia. I am your host for the evening. I am one of the chancellors and founder of Nerds with Dice, and I'm excited to have you here. And I am here with. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Liana MacKenzie. I am the owner the owner of Valorous Games, the co-creator of Valor, the heroic roleplay. Um, I am also a host with the Asians Represent podcast network, and I am generally perpetually busy with all kinds of other random things that I do.
Yeah, we were just talking about some of that, and just so y'all know, we do have an incentive that is active for this one. For $5, you can turn the tables on the interview, and Liana will ask me a question instead. Um, so I guess starters, I know a little bit about Valor, but
hmm
not a lot. What is
hmm
Valor? Explain it to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working at con, so I've been doing this all day. It's great. Valor is a system that Quinn, my co-creator, and I put together. Started as a college project, um, born out of a frustration with D20 after we successfully but frustratingly modded D20 to do Bleach back in the 3.5 days. So we set out to make a system that could really capture the feel of like, especially like the shonen battle anime. It was kind of the when the big three was super popular, so we wanted to really hit that feel. But also just like a system where you could sort of do and be any kind of character you want. So with Valor, what we ended up with is a system that doesn't do any of like the kind of the classic races, classes, none of that. You build based on your stats, and then you customize your own attacks, your own abilities. You pick from a wide array of skills that aren't necessarily locked down to any particular stat. Some are, many are not. And you just kind of build the kind of the character that you want and build what suits your concept rather than fitting them into narrow boxes. And then on top of that, we created the Valor system, which is what eventually we named the system after, where you slowly gain over the course of a scene a stat that also increases if you're like shouting attack names or being like super dramatic or like facing off against a rival. So we wanted to really capture that role play element and encourage people to really be using it no matter the kind of scene they were playing in.
That it does. I'm so fascinated by the idea of character creations systems that are so open like that, but also so overwhelmed by them sometimes. But it is a very cool concept. But I do like my PBTA games for a reason. It's
hmm
sometimes nice to just be able to grab it and go. um, so. What would you say your favorite element of Valor is?
Definitely the Valor stat. Kind of, so the way that works in resolution is Valor starts at 0, it goes up by 1, and every 3 Valor you can spend to do what's called an overdrive. Overdrives give you a huge boost, so you could potentially be adding +5 to a roll. We are an opposed D10 system, and to like critical hit, you need to exceed someone's roll by 10. So a common use of Valor is to turn something that was a miss into a hit or a hit into a critical hit. It's very exciting when you do it, and because it's role play based, it encourages players to really like invest in the scene and invest in the characters. And some scenes won't necessarily be like high valor scenes, but you know, if you're facing off against dramatic foes, it really encourages players to get personally invested in it. um, and then kind of the cherry on top of this whole system is the fact that valor is not banked. valor goes away at the end of every scene because it is very scene specific. The valor you gain is supposed to be your feelings in the moment. So it requires players to actually like continuously invest in the game, and we've gotten tremendous results whenever we've played it. When we were initially playtesting it, like it really gets people thinking in character and about how their character is acting and responding to the world around them. And it gives me in the tables I run a level of engagement I've never experienced in any of the other tabletop games I've run, which is very, very heartening to me. Like it feels good to see that.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I've There's a lot of what I know people like to call them like meta points out there, but I think that's the first one I've heard that is scene specific. That is interesting. Um, so you find that it really drives engagement.
It does. Because like that's the thing, right? Like if you're using some kind of a hero point system where you can bank them, you'll get that kind of role play. But this system, what it does is it really focuses on kind of the moment to moment, and it also interlocks with how we construct scenes, where basically our premise is if it's a scene, it should mean something, right? Like you don't need to be role playing out, you know, we don't encourage necessarily random encounters or things like that. It's like you're telling a story. This is a system to tell a story with these characters. Um, so scenes should be meaningful and important, which gets the GM to think about creating scenes that players can interact with, and then it gets players in turn thinking about how they can interact with the scene to get those juicy mechanical benefits. And then it ends up training them to be like, I'm just going to go all in all the time because it makes me stronger, and also I'm having a great time because all of us have just really committed to the bit. And you get this in comedy games, you get this in serious games. Like I've seen and run serious games where people are like, it's more like pathos driven, and that's what they get their valor from. But there's still like that mindset of like, because there's this nice little reward for me, it gets me thinking about how I can get more about it, get more of the reward. And because that reward is encouraging behavior we want in the game, it gets players in turn acting the way we want them to, which is really nice.
Yeah, that wow. That that really makes me want to play Valor now.
You
Wow.
should. It's a wonderful game, and I am not at all biased as the co-creator and owner of the company that sells the book.
Yeah. So what was the process like when creating Valor?
So we actually we had a few kind of core inspirations, and one of which was a game that's still a perennial favorite of mine. It's a bit obscure because it was only out in Japan until very recently, called Super Robot Wars, which is a big anime mashup of like a bunch of different mecha anime put into like a tactical RPG. They have a system called Will, which is where Valor is actually derived from, where the characters in the game gain more of this will as the battle goes on, and like special events can give them things like that. So we were looking at that, um, and then we kind of sat down and we were just kind of going through like popular shonen anime, especially, and like tropes and things that you should be able to do. So we are like, all right, so like here's Bleach. Bleach is huge at this time. I was originally trying to make Bleach in D20 before I got fed up and went over to make our own system. It's like, so what kind of things should we be able to do? We should be able to like crush someone's will with just like the force of your presence, which is something that happens in Bleach a lot, where like a captain shows up and then suddenly Ichigo's goes on the floor because he just can't take the sheer force of their presence. It's like, all right, cool, we got that. That eventually would become the intimidate skill. Um, We wanted to be able to like be able to transform your sword into something cool. We now have like the transformation ultimates because of that. So it was really like looking at these popular things and seeing what sort of things mechanically we needed to represent. And we were able to do pretty much everything except for time stop, which got taken out of the system almost immediately because it was busted. And if you want the world, we have other ways to recommend you do that because mechanically it's just kind of very, very, very broken.
Yeah. That I mean that is really cool. But sometimes I do notice, playing various games, the things you want to do and the things the game is designed to do don't always line up the way you want them to do. So that is um it's interesting to see a game where to hear about a game where your goal was to sort of open up and let people do the things they want to do. Well, let's see here. I have other questions. So I don't know much about starter adventures. I tend to whip up my own stories, but Best in Class is your starter adventure.
Mhm.
What is that? What was that like making? What is it in general? I
Yeah,
don't.
absolutely. So Best in Class, that was my first solo venture. Quinn and I are very good friends. They just moved to the frozen wastelands of Minnesota, and also really, really kind of hate like the independent business stuff. So they still do a lot of work with us, but generally they're having a good time doing their own thing, and they're happy to leave the business aspect to me in its entirety. So this was kind of the first solo writing project I had. I am definitely kind of game and narrative designer. I love world building. I was experimenting with a campaign setting, which we've since kind of put on the back burner. But this initial campaign setting was intended to be the idea of a fantasy world that has sort of attained the modern era. So we had, as the main country, kind of a American analog, and for some reason, in the eras of 2016 and especially the era of now, people were less than thrilled for that. But Best in Class kind of is sort of our first thrust into that sort of a setting. It deals with a bunch of kids attending basically an analog to an Ivy League university for adventuring, right? Where we're trying to learn to become accredited monster hunters and villain bashers. Um, I I set out wanting to make this able to be somewhat lighter in tone, but also reflect actual issues, which is how even these rich kids end up running afoul with the corrupt police department. I end up, because I have no chill, writing like a path split in the middle where you can kind of choose to be good kids and go back to school, or you can choose to try and upend the entire corrupt cop organization in your rich kid college town. Um, Unfortunately or fortunately, these always seem to resonate in my writing, no matter what I'm doing or the kinds of people I'm trying to portray. But in terms of game design, I really set out to make something that was accessible, especially to new game masters, in addition to new game masters who are running Valor, which I assume will be most of the people because we are a tiny indie system and not a lot of people have played us. I wanted to make something that was really good at teaching. So I tried to keep things interesting but accessible. Um, because Valor lets you do so much with the different kinds of character builds, and because we spent about 9 years playtesting this thing to make sure that our numbers all lined up, I have a lot of freedom with what I pick and how I want to design the villains and all of that, and the sample characters that we include in the system, so that you don't actually have to buy the core book. You can just use the ones that we've given you. Um, so like I wanted to make sure that there was a decent mix of kind of like moderate to easy characters, Nothing that will give a GM too much of a scare, but enough that might surprise them every once in a while. Like, for example, there's a character who kind of builds around a counterattack, which is a bit unusual. Not insurmountable, but definitely can still put even a new GM through the paces. I admit it may be considered somewhat unkind, but I do think sometimes the best way to learn is by experiencing something that you're not accustomed to and just kind of having to, sort of see what happens. And I think in Valor, because the environments are controlled, in these circumstances, the worst thing that's going to happen to this new GM is like, oh, well, this fight's going to end up a bit easier. But that's okay, because really you're just trying to learn how to do this and get your adventuring party through. Um, the nice thing about balancing Valor 2 is like TPK risks are usually very low. We have a lot of tools that we can kind of walk the GM through to make sure that if you really want or need your party to get through something, you can make that happen for them. Again, with like the Valor system we mentioned earlier. Uh, so it definitely gives GMs kind of that space to sort of play around with it and kind of figure out how they want to handle the narrative to get a result that's going to be narratively satisfying, for everybody. Um, and then the other part of that is just trying to make sure to explain in plain language how everything works. Make sure that all of the builds have very clear descriptions of how they all work right on the page. So the GM can be on that page and it's like, all right, we're in this fight. Here are the NPCs. Here's all their abilities. It's all written out for me. Um, it works, and I have to spend minimal time thinking about it.
Yeah, I love that. That is awesome. Let's see. Well, what would you say your game design principles are if you were to boil it down to a few things?
I definitely trend cinematic. I like games that will not get bogged down in realism if they're trying to hit a narrative point or tell a story. So I love that, and I love customization and freedom. Like, I am at my happiest when I am making a game that lets you do whatever the heck you want. Um, because I am also something of a consummate perfectionist. However, I also must in my own right make sure that it is balanced and satisfying to play and works. And that is why I spend entirely too much time on like everything I make, because I will over test everything. But and even then I can still get it wrong. But like that's very important to me. It's like I want, if I, especially if I'm going to like ask someone for money for my game, I want it to be a complete experience, one that delivers something that is creative and hopefully unique to my style. Like, I don't really see other games that exist quite like Valor where you have that kind of creative freedom, but also a balanced combat system that's right at home for like a D&D aficionado. Um, so I want to make sure to deliver on that experience, but I also want it to be polished enough that it's worth someone's time and money, because like I want to respect that. If someone makes the decision to give me money for a book that I've written, I owe it to them to make sure that that is the best thing I can give them.
Yeah, that I mean that totally makes sense to me. Let's see. What other questions? Well, what does game design mean to you when you, which I guess is a sort of an extension of the last question. What does game design mean to you?
For me, I mean, game design, I would say, how esoteric am I going to get here? Okay, like for me, games are something that I want to do to have fun. Um, so, like, if I'm designing a game, a lot of times, like, kind of the first things I'm going to be engaging, I'm going to be like designing for, testing for is like, is this fun to play? Is this an enjoyable experience that I can share with other people? I am a firm believer in the power of play. I think especially, and I understand that I'm an incredible hypocrite because I overbook myself like all the time, and I'm always working and I'm always kind of grinding away with like day job and stuff like this. But for me, the experience I want to deliver is one of joy, is one of enjoyment, is one of like having fun. I want someone to walk away from that table and have thought it was a worthwhile use of their time, and to walk away perhaps a bit happier or more content or more fulfilled or more excited than they were when they stepped into the table. So like for me, the fun factor is always going to be central to what I'm designing for and what I consider game design to really encompass is like, yeah, I'm making a game. I'm making something that I want to be fun. That's not to say that, games that can be frustrating or challenging or stuff don't exist or shouldn't exist. I have concepts for them myself. Um, but I guess perhaps the better way to say it would be satisfying. Like, if there is an emotion I'm trying to target, often it is joy, but not always. I want to make sure that the game appropriately evokes that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, when I pick up a new game, the first thing I look at is character creation. It's going to tell me the most about whether or not I'm going to have fun with the system. And I'm not going to pick that book up again if I don't like the character creation system or anything, something about it, and because I'm not going to have fun with it. So yeah, that's, and I got to say, so far, sounds like I'll have a lot of fun with that. It so one of my favorite games is made by a friend of mine called Exceptionals, which has some Valor like openness to it because it's sort of X-Men like. So there's not like a list of powers you select from. You have a list of questions you answer about your character to decide sort of what powers you have. Um, and so I can tell that I'm gonna be overwhelmed by it, but love the character creation system because I have a hard time making decisions, which is where the you know hard part is going to be. But let's see. Do you believe that like the queerness affects your game design, and how do you feel that affects your game design?
100%. In fact, Quinn and I have had this conversation quite a bit. So we are both trans. I am trans femme, a trans woman, and then Quinn is non-binary. Um, we weren't out when we made Valor. We were college roommates. Um, but that transness, I feel like, really brought itself to the fore in how we handled character creation. Our vision was that of a game that would not confine you to boxes, a game where you could make any kind of character you could dream up and you could play that character, and that character would be viable and would be able to participate in the game. Um, Ultimately, like Valor does have a few character creation rules, not many, but basically it's like, all right, pick two stats, maximize them, or pick three stats and take this other special skill, but like specialize in some stuff, and then you're golden. And so long as you do that, you can basically, the world is your oyster in terms of character designing, and that freedom kind of permeates my design sense. Like I'm always trying to think about how I can open things up. Like even when I sit down to design like a class based game, a game with like various classes and stuff like that, I'm always thinking about like, what about multi-class options? What about other kinds of things to make characters more interesting? Like Valor itself, because it is sort of a pick two stat system, uh, a lot of our characters are kind of inherently what we would consider to be multi-classed in like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. If I wanted to make a fighter mage in D&D, a lot of times you're looking at this kind of like eldritch warrior with like all kinds of special packages and abilities that you want to get to set them up just right. In Valor, the way we do it is we have you specialize in like strength and spirit. And it's like, I am good at swinging swords and I am good at magic, and I can kind of combine them with how I build the skills and build the techniques that I use. And it's just that easy. Um, so like that ends up being a big part of the core design, and how I would definitely say our queerness and our transness especially impacted that, that desire to just be able to be seen as and be whatever it is we want to be and what we are.
Yeah, I certainly understand that part. Um, it is, playing games in general is a big part of that for me. I'm not much of a game designer myself, but um, big on the playing and running games, and so I understand. When I make a character, I want it to be something that I like, something that I feel reflects something, or something that maybe I want to explore. So um, that is great. I'm looking at my questions here. I should have wrote down more questions. Um, well, other than Valor,
Mhm.
if you had a dream project, what would it be?
Oh goodness. So I have at the very least the starts of design documents for a variety of games and systems. I have ideas for MOBAs, I have ideas for MMORPGs. The one that I come back to the most and I am the most interested in finding a way to make happen. I'm not in a position to do so right now, but this one is my dream game. Is a strategy RPG, um, kind of drawing inspiration from a lot of the games I love. Final Fantasy Tactics, for example, is a huge inspiration for me. I'm so glad that people are, with the announce of the remake, are coming to understand that the creator, a personal hero of mine, Yasumi Matsuno, um, is talking about, and people are seeing him talk about things like how these games can reflect the realities of like wealth inequality and oppression by upper classes and stuff like that. I dream to make a game that is able to challenge that kind of system in much the same way as he did. Um, and I have a concept for a game with just like a way to make it mechanically fascinating, of drawing on inspiration too from like Persona and Fire Emblem, and having like this huge cast of characters, um, and a game where you have your central party, and as you recruit more people, you can start sending them across the land during like a fixed time period, where depending on where your characters go, that opens up the events you can do, where you'll have like certain factions might be warring in a certain area. You might have to choose to pick a side. Um, the side you pick determines who over here you end up recruiting. Maybe you can make peace with them. Maybe you can't because you sent a person who's closely lined with one side. Uh, and the idea of like this world is kind of happening, and as you're moving around it, the areas that you go and the people you engage with kind of define what your ultimate faction, your ultimate group looks like when you are confronting the kind of the final boss. Um, Story conceptually is basically like this is an area that toppled their former tyrant, and now they've kind of descended into factional infighting, but uh, a larger colonial force is coming. So your job is you need to create some kind of unity and figure out a way to repel the force. The idea being then that you could play this a bunch of times, and just depending on the areas you choose to go at any given point in the time progression of this story, you might get an entirely different storyline. Not something that you often see in tactical RPGs, strategy RPGs like this, something I think is very achievable, it would require an enormous writing staff to be able to account for all of like the conditional factors, but it's very doable. I have a lot of like firm, concrete ideas of how I would set this up from a programming perspective, as well as just from a story and narrative perspective. So that is probably my dream project, my dream game, and it is one that like the big pie in the sky project that I'm hoping to one day be able to drive towards and raise funds to be able to put together and make a reality. Because I do that. Like if I want to have something happen, I try and figure out the way to get there, and then I start running down that road.
Yeah, I mean, wow. So it sounds like that idea has elements of community building, I would almost
Absolutely.
say.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I mean, that is fascinating. I love games with community building, which is why I often get disappointed by, like, especially in the TTRPG world, zombie games, because some of them are very focused
Mm-hmm.
on how cool your character is, and I want the we're building something for survivors part. So
I mean, this ties back to our Valor design too. Like you talk community building. The one of the core tenets of Valor's design is there are no broken characters; there are broken teams. I'm a huge proponent of community building. I am naturally an extrovert. I love people. I love being around people. I love meeting new people. I love talking to people, and I also, like, as a designer, I understand my limits very well. Like I am not an artist, for example. I contract a lot of artists to do the wonderful art in Valor, because I am also stubborn and a perfectionist. So I insist on kind of this like small press quality of work with fantastic art and professional layout and stuff like that. So that means I am hiring people who are skilled at things that I am not, and finding a way to make it work. And I am trying to find ways to work with them to make sure that the project is satisfying for them, is going to help their own resumes, help their own personal ambitions, and to accomplish these things together. I've had artists who we've worked with who I can't afford anymore because they've gone on to do such great things, and like I'm super happy for them. I'm sad that I don't have the budget for them anymore, but for Valor to have played a huge part or even like a small part in their development means the world to me. And a lot of these people are still like we have to force money into hands sometimes when we're buying prints at certain artist alleys, and that's kind of like building those firm relationships and treating people right and building that community is something that's thankfully I guess come naturally to me, and is something that I also try and infuse my games with.
yeah, wow. Um, is there anything else specific that you wanted to talk about? Anything upcoming or anything you wanted to add about Valor
Yeah,
specifically?
actually. So we actually just funded a reprint not too long ago, but long enough ago, where we reprinted the core book, updated the dead names to our proper names on both. That was really exciting, and all of the errata from everything I screwed up or didn't catch playtesting or otherwise messed up. And I will take full blame for that, even though Quinn was also very heavily involved in that particular project, because Quinn doesn't have to deal with the business side because they were the smart one, and I am the fool who keeps running down this road, despite how expensive it is. Um, but we've moved on to our next project, which is Valor Villains, Creatures, and Foes, which is the monster book. Very handy for a system like this that has this kind of complexity in combat. We are very nearly complete with the text. I've already got editing running for some of the completed parts, as I work to wrap up the last few builds and the last few kind of narrative things. Um, so that is also going to be kind of the soft launch for our campaign setting. I'm working on a campaign setting that I'm very excited about. Uh, it is a campaign setting that is based around like I have folks from a number of different cultural backgrounds who are kind of helping me write this, the idea of like a bunch of smaller nations who all sort of came together to create this kind of defensive empire where instead of achieving empire through colonialism, they achieved it through mutual defense and cooperation. And I'm also creating this world as a world where magic is expressed through artistic expression. So, you know, like painting might create magic, or singing, or you know, ominous choral chanting, or you know, any kind of artistic expression is where magic is derived, and that is really going to be kind of the next big book for us, which we're kind of writing in tandem. I'm very excited about that. Also doing Magical Academy stuff with like different houses in the academy, but you know, with same development. So maybe people will have something else and they can stop giving money to someone who is trying to eradicate trans people. That would be nice. Give me that money instead, please. I will do something good with it instead of something terrible. So yeah, those are our two big projects. My hope is to have the Villains, Creatures, and Foes Kickstarter ready within the next few months. I just also need to figure out this printing situation because our Mad King keeps imposing tariffs and retracting tariffs, and it is a headache and it makes printing physical books difficult. But we are trying to get that figured out. We do have some potential avenues to work with since I am very committed to delivering like professional hardcover books for you to have on your shelf and have on your table. So challenges abound, but still we persist.
Yeah, well, that is exciting news. Love to hear that there is more coming out. Um, we are getting close to starting to wrap up. But I do have one final question for you, if you're okay
Mm-hmm.
sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a moment of queer joy?
A moment of queer joy. So when I first came out, I'm also a lesbian. I'm married to a woman, and it turned out she was gay the entire time. So that was a lovely discovery. But I, in case the dress that I am wearing is not enough of an indication. I'm very femme in terms of presentation, how I like to dress, how I like to present myself. I was at a con selling today too, so like I'm trying to dress up a bit. Um, but I also tend to wear this like all the time. Like this is how I dress. Anyway, we'd gotten me some skirts, and I I just happened to be sitting on the couch and hadn't ever been taught this or anything, but I just kind of like very naturally, you know, had my legs to the side, like that very prim ladylike thing. And my wife Jenna comes home and she like walks in the room and she looks at me and she's like, "How are you doing this already? Who taught you that?" And I'm like, "They taught me not to do this, so this is just reversion to the mean, hun." But that was a nice bit of validation.
I love that. That is so cute and so good. Um, I guess I will also share, since I kind of want this weekend to be a little bit of a celebration, not just us
Mm-hmm.
raising money. I will also share. So I won't say it's completely new, but I've sort of we'll say sort of accepted, come around to the fact that I'm asexual. It's been a long process of sort of like maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but I've sort of accepted that I am, and honestly, it's kind of a freeing moment of feeling like, no, this is who I am, and I've realizing that in a little bit of a way that I was sometimes trying to force something that wasn't there, and being able to relax and not have that is kind of a really nice moment, and just sort of living in it. So we are a, a little bit early, so I have a couple of videos here, folks, um, from Trans Justice Project. we are going to flip over to one of them for a little bit, so that you can watch them, learn a little bit more about what we're doing today. Um, and we can start to wrap up. And up next for this is Inevitable. And we will be giving away a copy of Inevitable during that stream. We have physical copies of Valor Best in Class, and the combo pack, as well as PDFs to give away all weekend long. So um, come join us for all of those amazing giveaways. And we will, well, I will for sure see you around all weekend. I will be here. Is there, do you want to tell people where they can find you? And
Yeah, absolutely. I am at Valor Liana on Blue Sky. Like technically I'm there on Twitter too, but I don't bother with that. So you won't really see anything from me on Twitter because I would rather not. Also at Valorous Games, again on Blue Sky. You can follow us at valorousgames.com is our main website. We are also Valorous Games on itch.io. We have some bonus articles, like I have free little articles about how if you wanted to run like Fire Emblem or something like that. Just fun little things for IPs I absolutely do not own, and I am not going to charge you money for, but just extra bonus rules for special campaigns and stuff like that. And then, yeah, keep an eye on our website, which we will hopefully be redesigning soon, but we'll have more news on upcoming Kickstarters and stuff like that. Hope to see you there.
yeah, and I am Sophia. You can find me usually here with Nerds at Dice, obviously. And well, these videos are not working. Hold on.
We had technical difficulties before we started here too, so like this is just
Yeah, I'm going
tech gremlins abound.
Yeah, I'm gonna go re-grab the links for those while I sign myself out. So otherwise, right now, there's one more session left for Sword and Keys Under Blue Moon, which is a summer in Wood Lake game. It's a little creepy horror game, and so far has been so much fun. Um, a lot of emotions at play there, and just great. So if you haven't caught up on that, I recommend. But Thursday night is the finale. And then later this month, I will be on June 28th. I will be on Roll for Felicity for Incredibly Indie. We'll be playing Gilfey. And then otherwise, I will keep an eye out for me in what is it? That time we replaced the Power Rangers, I'll be playing Scorpina and Skull and that. So keep an eye out for those. And I am all ready with these videos, so we will see you later. Bye, everyone.
Federal government, and it is alarming how
they will
I like to think about this work as courage work. So courage means from the heart.
At the core of what we do is trust and support trans leadership. Part of that is to resource the dreams and the visions of our community in whatever form that looks like.
My name is Swai. I was born Pham Minh Quang, which means wise leader in Vietnamese. I'm the daughter of Vietnamese refugees, people who survived war and famine and voyages across the ocean. I am a storyteller. Stories are how we understand our world and how we understand ourselves. Part of my work is telling the kinds of stories that expand all of our imagination so that we can understand the true divinity and wisdom of trans people.
Our dreams can become our reality when we invite each other to envision and create together.
Every time I leave from that work, one, I'm thankful. Two, I'm inspired. Um, I leave with a sense of peace and happiness. When I look at that map of all the cities and states and territories that we have dispersed money to help people that look like me, who 30 years ago, I didn't have that. You know what I'm saying? I had to struggle, and, to see us taking care of our own is an amazing thing.
We're changing this sort of scarcity model of fighting for one slice of the pie and really thinking about how we can support each other and lift each other up.
Building a world where folks feel fully safe, fully themselves, fully able to build systems of care that they need, that we need.
One of my first interactions with TJFP was when I was organizing groups doing prison visitations with trans folks in California. And at the time, we didn't have very much money at all to do those visitations, but because of TJFP providing financial resources, we were able to pay for transportation, for meals, for more people to go inside of prisons to support trans folks on the inside.
I think the Trans Justice Funding Project is trans brilliance, trans creativity, is helping us dream bigger and giving us the materials that we need to build our own table, to feed ourselves and to feed each other so that we can be nourished and full and figure out what's next together.
My grandmother, Miss Dolores Winston, I bring her to the altar because of her love of people, her love of me, and how she encouraged me to be the very best that I could be. She also instilled in me, just a love for people and acceptance of everyone. When I talk about abundance or think about abundance, I think about her and what she contributed in my life and the overwhelming love that she instilled in me for people and for my community. And that's really why I do the work, because of her love.
This basket full of healing and protection. So I have in here items like the cedar that protects. I have items that like my corn pollen pouch that I do my prayers and my blessings with when I go to events or functions. And also having my eagle feathers and my hawk feathers, and also sage for cleansing. So I offer this this basket of healing and protection. Blessings to everyone.
There are very few things we can do to go back to who we are. I come from an ocean people. I'm Filipinx, and this came from my homeland. I offer this oyster shell to all of us.
I've been a Native Hawaiian trans leader here in Hawaii since 2003. I use this in spaces, especially in Native Hawaiian spaces, where we blow the horn and we notify people, we notify our ancestors, we call to the lands, we call to the people across the oceans and connects us all. So I use this poo and I offer the sounds of my poo out to our altar space to honor our ancestors and also to connect all of our people across the lands, across the Pacific, across the Atlantic, across all the oceans, and making sure we have space and we know that together our voice is louder.
There's nothing more powerful than, folks in the community who are deeply impacted by the issues being able to be part of resourcing the work.
It's really the beginning of a dream. It's modeling the world that we should have always lived in. It's giving trans people the resources to really actualize their creativity and manifest the beautiful realities that we dream up every day.
I hope you feel honored. I hope you feel remembered. I hope you feel appreciated. Thank you for all that you give.